The current media world is expansive and complex.
Yep, he really did call a female reporter Piggy.
Specifically in politics, online media is a major center for campaigning. It all started with Obama's race in 2008, in which he was nicknamed the digital candidate.
Barack Obama successfully captured young voters by finding them where they hang out, online.
And he used emails, text messages, videos, and websites in order to campaign. At the time, Obama was uniquely singled out for this, but 2 decades later, the strategy he took on is now an essential part of political campaigning. This year, New York City elected their first Muslim mayor, Zohran Mamdani. During Mamdani's campaign, the majority of information that I got about him was from TikTok. I am not the only one with this experience. Knowing his target voters to win the election were majority youth, he intentionally chose social media platforms as a focus for his campaigning, especially TikTok, in order to reach these people in a way that they understood, a language they understood, in a way I feel no politician has ever achieved before. His success was massive, getting nearly 80% of voters under the age of 30 to back him on election day. Clearly, Mamdani's focus on social media campaigning worked. But how? Why specifically did it work so well? Despite vocabulary that we use in class such as allegiance, alignment, and identification being mostly used in reference to characters in film, these concepts can be readily applied to social media as well. So in this video, I will be answering the question, how does Mamdani's political campaigning relate to ideas that we've learned in class, such as identification and representation? And how can what I know help me look into his campaigning in a deeper, more thoughtful manner? At the end of the day, even though I really like the guy, Mamdani's still a politician, whose career depends on getting the public to identify with him. Not only was his mayoral race a game of policy and political viewpoints, it was also a game of influence. Mamdani's campaign advertised the idea that his success would mean everyone's success in the entire city. But in order to make people feel like his success will really be their successes, he has to get them to identify with him. There are a myriad of ways that Mamdani achieves this, but we can take a look at his strategy through 3 main lenses. First, his personability. Second, his representation. And finally, him taking the role of the hero. Every TikTok that I reference is going to be directly from Mamdani's page. So, let's get started. There are a lot of ways that Mamdani uses his personability to connect with his voters. One of them is showing up in their spaces, whether that's a restaurant, a club, or a concert. Mamdani wants to reach these people where they are, and he's unafraid to visit locations other politicians might be hesitant to go to, like a club or a concert. Also, he shows a side of playfulness that contributes to his personability that other candidates don't usually have. You see him dancing, chatting it up, laughing it up in these clubs, and you think, wow, he's like us! And that is the identification. On his TikTok page, there are a lot of videos that focus on specifically emphasizing his humanity. He makes jokes with the people he talks to.
It's becoming an unaffordable seat to riff with the fellas in, you know?
Yeah. And I think people ask me why, right?
Yeah.
He goes to sports events. And he interacts with New Yorkers out on the street.
We're outside because New Yorkers deserve a mayor that they can see, they can hear, they can even yell at.
Posting all of these things is very intentional. He's trying to say, I'm not just a politician, I'm also one of you. Zohran's media presence absolutely set him apart from his competitors. I'd like to mention Greg Smith's writing, How Do We Identify with Characters?, where he says, the difference between a protagonist and a supporting character is that we know more about the protagonist. Essentially, with Mamdani pumping out all of these TikToks that have to do with him, he's establishing himself as the protagonist. And who do watchers identify with? The protagonist. And as a protagonist would, he shows up on Saturday Night Live. Well, not him, exactly. But with all these videos of Mamdani laughing at an imitation of him.
Is that my tie?
Or joking about not being physically fit.
It's not at the marathon, because my 12-minute, 54-second mile is...
Or posting whatever this is. He's trying to establish himself as just a guy that happens to be a politician who wants to make your life easier. He goes to the same clubs. He eats at the same places. He laughs at the same things. And that's how he got his voters to identify with him. But now I'd like to move on to our second category, representation. One of the things we know about Zohran Mamdani is that he's Muslim, the first Muslim elected mayor in New York City. And I consider that a really big deal, because Muslims in America get a really bad rap. However, if it were going to happen in any city, it would have been this one, because New York City is the most diverse city in America. And Mamdani took advantage of this. He uses his identity to connect with his voters, speaking to them in their own language,
Thank you.
showing to his voters how similar he is to them. He knows firsthand what it's like to deal with the hate and prejudice that Muslims get. And he acknowledges this with his voters.
And I want to take a moment here, and I just want to ask everyone in this crowd, if you can raise your hand if you have been called a terrorist while living in this city.
When have these Muslim voters ever been able to relate to a politician in this way? They haven't. Many Arab speakers in America are afraid to speak their language because of the hostility that arises from doing so. So for Mamdani to post a video on his TikTok page addressing his audience entirely in Arabic is a huge deal.
مرحبا، أنا اسمي زهران ممداني، وعم رشح حالي ليكون العمدة الجديد في مدينة نيويورك.
But Mamdani accounts for all communities. He also acknowledges the Latino community in New York City, speaking to them in Spanish in his campaign ads.
Hola Nueva York! Ya pueden salir a votar y estoy pidiendo su apoyo. Por favor, busque su lugar de votación más cercano y voten por mí para ser su próximo alcalde.
He also shows videos of him trying to learn Spanish.
New word in here. The only new word is here is ponga. Every other word you've said a bunch of times.
All the words are new!
Offering a representation to others that Spanish is important and meaningful to learn.
Cercano.
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 What's cerrado mean?
Close.
While also representing the Spanish-speaking community in general. But it's not just the language that he speaks, he also involves himself in culture as well. And here he is, dancing. With his positive representation and genuine compassion towards all communities, Mamdani was able to secure a large portion of minority votes, all while representing a whole range of beautiful communities. What he's doing is meaningful, and it's beyond just saying he's representing people. He's changing a narrative. The narrative of Muslims being terrorists, of English being the priority language that everyone should speak, that a politician has to be this separate person. He's representing a lot here. All of those communities, of course, but he's also representing a new era of politicians, perhaps setting the stage for some serious progression.
Moi voulais voter pour Zohran Mamdani.
Unë votoj për Zohran Mamdanin.
Zohran Mamdani 4 ਨਵੰਬਰ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਜ਼ੋਹਰਾਨ ਮਮਦਾਨੀ ਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਲਈ ਵੋਟ ਦਾਂਗੀ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਮਿਹਨਤ ਕਸ਼ਾਂ ਦੀ ਤਕਲੀਫ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਹੈ.
Now, that clip brings us to our final category. This is something that Greg Smith talks about in his writing of how do we identify with characters, which is the pleasure of identifying with the hero, also known as somnophilia. So as we built up, Mamdani's got his voters to identify with him, and he's represented them too. But our final point is essentially about how he fits this hero role, which helped him win the race. I'm going to show clips from one of the longest videos on Mamdani's page, acknowledging and recognizing the struggles of the Muslim community in America. and standing up for them, despite how many years they've been marked as terrorists.
6 years ago, shortly after I had announced I was running for assembly, a well-meaning Muslim uncle pulled me aside. He smiled softly and looked at me with care. In a quiet voice, he told me I did not have to tell people I was Muslim. His eyes kind, his beard proud, and his face heavy with the implication of the unsaid. I want to use this moment to speak to the Muslims of the city. More than 1 million Muslim New Yorkers exist in this city only to be made to feel as if guests in our own home. No more. I will not change who I am. I will not change how I eat. I will not change the faith that I am proud to belong to. But there is one thing I will change. I will no longer look for myself in the shadows. I will find myself in the light. Thank you.
Mamdani is fully aware what it means for him to be a Muslim candidate running for mayor of New York City. He has lived and understands the Islamophobia. And Muslims have had to be quiet because of how hated they are in this country. But what Mamdani's doing is giving them a beacon of hope, of really being their hero. And I say it's a hero complex, but he really does act like one. You know, he says, no more, and I'm not gonna look for myself in the shadows. I will find myself in the light. He's guiding other Muslims to not be afraid anymore, to be who they are, since he already got his voters to identify with him through his personability, the things he does, the places he goes, wherever. And he represents them. Now, with the voters already identifying with him, when he presents himself as this hero towards them, they feel even more connected to him because of the pleasure that comes with aligning with a moral and ethical character. These people feel good about themselves when they identify with Mamdani.
Mugamba mtia abana beka. Waafrika wenzangu, sisi ni wahamiaji hapa New York City. Zohran Mamdani amesema atatupa ulinzi, atasimama nasi, na sisi tusimame naye. Pamoja tutaweza.
Ma ku bar mu fito da yawan mu da kwanmu da kwarkwatan mu. Mu saya bayan wanda yake duk lokacin da masala ya same mu shi ma yana siyawa bayan mu.
I felt that these clips in particular really help show the idea of Mamdani being a hero, but not just to the Muslim community, to others as well. They believe in him and support him because he wants to make their lives easier. He wants to make housing more affordable, help small businesses, and more. These people finally feel seen by a politician, and Mamdani gladly step up to take that role. Finally, he talks about his opponents a lot. But specifically, since they're so corrupt and terrible, objectively, he presents voting in the election like this to his voters.
New Yorkers will cast their ballots. We will make a very simple choice. A choice between democracy and oligarchy. A choice between a city you can afford or more of the same.
He gives them a choice between democracy and oligarchy. And by putting himself on the democracy side, he's simultaneously inserting himself into the hero role, the better role, the good character role, which people will certainly identify with. It turns out that a lot of the stuff we learned in class applied to Mamdani's TikTok campaign, which doesn't surprise me, but it was cool to go through. The idea of identification is really interesting to me, and it was great to have a chance to go through a politician's campaigning and see how that applies there. I also very strongly believe that Mamdani's campaign team knew very well what it meant for him to represent so many kinds of people.
Ooh, burden of representation.
I'm sure they knew he was taking the role of the hero as well. So by doing this, I was able to understand his campaign managers better, giving me a little bit more insight into what's going on up here when campaign managers are thinking of what to do. But all in all, I'm personally elated that Mamdani got elected. I think it's super awesome, and I'm really glad I was able to study him a bit here. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye!